Thanks so much for having me. And so I had decided to run for office in Shelton in the Naugatuck Valley. And after running and serving in local office, began to work for others, manage campaigns, deal with some advocacy through nonprofits, local, state, beginning to get involved federally. And I had been working for others in this space. And I really saw the benefit of engaging people into politics, getting new people to run, people with interesting ideas, particularly at the local and state levels. And then actually ran for vice chair of our Connecticut Democratic Party, where I really have been working on this idea of year-round organizing, building our party, and building more resources. And so all of this came together with this idea that I had about a year and a half ago, thinking, I looked around and there are certainly a lot of political memoirs and there are political theory books, but there really wasn't a how-to book, particularly written from
Mhm.
someone who has done it. I've served locally, but I've worked for others. I've been a party leader. I've been the volunteer. I've been the campaign manager. I've played all these various roles. And I thought, this could be helpful to others in Connecticut, but also outside of Connecticut, because we talk in the book in such a way that it really is applicable no matter where you are in our country if you want to get involved in local or state politics.
I love it. I love it. Okay, so having run a couple campaigns myself, what are the differences today versus say 5 years ago, and what do you see going into the future? Because I'm seeing a sea change, but you tell me what you're seeing.
How we communicate is changing. The technology is changing. I always say so many gave Barack Obama credit in 2008 for his digital organizing, which was advanced at the time. It is not the digital organizing of 10 or 15 years ago, of vertical videos, having a conversation with people digitally when they're scrolling on their phones. I mean, for good or for bad, so many are on their phones all their time. They are plugged in. And interestingly, with the decrease of newspapers, circulation, general, press outlets, we are still constantly scrolling. And so there needs to be this constant feed of content that we are providing people and trying to pierce through the noise, the misinformation, the disinformation. So how we communicate, how you get out a message, and there's now so many ways to do that, which I think actually can reduce the barriers of entry into politics. But all of that
Mm.
digital work still can't replace person-to-person conversations and being out there. That I feel still think is tried and true and will never go away. Having those one-on-one conversations with people.
So you still got a door knock. That is one of the number one things. And I remember door knocking maybe 4,300 doors when I was running for state senate. It was a good amount of doors.
Yeah.
Happened to door knock with Will Haskell at one point. It felt like I was knocking with this, a celebrity star. People were literally at the door and they, turn around to their husband, "Hey, Will Haskell's here." So if you get your name out there and people love you, they're really just so excited to have this conversation with you. So I agree with that. I think it's so important to have that face to face conversation. So is it like when I was running, it was something like 80-20 mail to digital? Are those numbers changing today? What would you be recommending?
I always say when dealing with your overall budget, at least two-thirds of your budget should really go to voter contact. Those are the dollars that are really going to go to talk to a voter, however that may be, digital or through a mail program or through someone who is dedicated solely to knocking on doors if you're doing a paid canvas operation. But when you raise money to a campaign, which is so precious, both our time and our dollars in a campaign, you really want to make sure that at least two-thirds of your campaign budget is going to contacting voters, because the whole point is to really get your message out to voters. So that's a general rule of thumb. Digital is really important. And also every district is a little different. Some districts, maybe depending on the race someone is running in, they maybe would consider digital ads or TV ads. But most in a local race don't need to run TV ads. Most need to be doing mailers, doing digital, and really doing the grassroots work of talking to people and creating that energy in their town. I start the book with thinking about, why do you even want to get involved? What's your why? What is driving you to do this? It's not about some big fancy title or because someone's bored. Why do you want to get involved and what's your why? And if someone has that, that then can carry them through the whole campaign so that when they are talking to voters, they're explaining what they care about and they are talking about what matters to them and what they want to do in their community. And that can really carry a candidate through all the ways in which we might reach voters.
Yeah, it's so important that what's your why is kind of everything. You really have to be authentically involved. It can't be just sort of like, oh, this is a vanity project for myself. It's got to be, I am very passionate about I don't know, could be education. For me, it was women's reproductive rights. I could go on and on. But I think that's one of the keys here, right? And there's a reason why you wrote this book, right? This book is not for Democrats or Republicans. It's really for anybody who wants to run. But why is this important to you?
Well, thank you. And it's true. I thought about the book. I very easily could have slid into a more partisan tone, but I thought, you know what? When getting involved, particularly locally, the potholes don't care about party. They just need to be fixed. And so whether you're a Democrat or Republican with a third party, not with the party at all, in thinking about running for office, I wanted to explain in a how-to way how one can do it. Of course, I know where I stand politically. I do hope that people are approaching this from a very authentic place, which is why I really start the book with that. But it was important for me because I did not study political science. I was not from a political family. I really learned this. I kind of learned by doing everything that I did. I did just by learning, trial and error, as I moved through and ran locally, and then got involved in state and national politics with the Democratic Party. And I thought, more should be getting involved. I think that's also a big conversation that's happening now. But we always are asking people to run or to be a party leader, and then they do that, and they look around and they think, what have I gotten myself into? And so we need to train more, build more resources, teach people how to do this work. A teacher teaches, a singer sings, but someone that gets involved in elective office, how do I do this work? Some might say, well, you just represent the people. Yes, you do that. But how do you even get there? What are the ways in which to run a campaign? And so I moved through the book all the how-tos of door knocking, digital, fundraising, messaging, communications, dealing with attacks and setbacks and frustrations that will undoubtedly happen in a political campaign, no matter the level, scheduling, moving through getting out the vote, moving through election day, bringing the reader all the way through the campaign. And along the way, while it's not a memoir, I realize that personal stories help. And so I talk about the relationships I've developed. I talk about the lessons that I've learned, and I do include many personal stories, most of which do take place here in Connecticut. So I think it'll be of interest to Connecticut residents about the lessons that I've learned, because I think it adds color to the stories.
So important. Now, part of this really seems to be your kind of push to get everyone engaged. You sort of start off with, this doesn't have to be for somebody who's got a lot of money or even special education. It's get engaged, be involved in your community, roll up your sleeves, and show up, right?
Right, right, absolutely. You don't need a lot of money. You don't need a big network of people initially. You don't need to be well connected. In fact, I think it's quite the opposite. I think people that might be sitting at home frustrated or feeling disconnected from their government should really think about, why is that? And I move through all the different ways. We start really with some simple ways just to get involved, whether it's attending a town meeting, learning how your town operates, learning how your state operates. We dabble a little bit with advocacy and kind of lobbying and how you would talk with elected officials and maybe play in the space that you later want to run for office in. But we really start with the basics. So it's someone who might be a little apprehensive and saying, well, I don't know if I want to run just yet. The whole first part is really going to set the table for you and show you some options. And then we're really going to hone in on how you would manage a campaign and then how you would run for office.
It's so important. Okay, so how about TikTok? Now, are you suggesting that people start getting involved? And certainly we saw how incredibly important TikTok was to Zohran Mamdani. He really connected with his voters. He got out, he spoke to people, he got this following going. The guy, nobody had heard his name 10 months before the actual election. So are you saying, hey, do Mamdani? What are you thinking? Do something like Mamdani?
There's no doubt it was the second highest turnout election in New York City of all time, and that is because of what he was able to do. And so I think about that online organizing, online communication. Yes, you want to play everywhere. And if your campaign feels like they can't play everywhere because of resources or time, then you need to choose some platforms and do it well. But no doubt, vertical videos, short videos where people feel like you're not talking at them, but suddenly I feel like I'm there with him. If I'm in a diner, I somehow feel that I am with you. And so now we are having a conversation that builds a rapport between a voter and a candidate. And that's why you're seeing it was moving in this direction. But I think what he did really advanced that. We need to be on platforms, talking with people, getting people to engage authentically. And that kind of energy that you might see online can move offline into votes support for our purposes, maybe a small contribution or a lawn sign or someone just believing in a policy you're talking about and then ultimately voting for you. So whether it's TikTok, Instagram, Facebook is still tried and true, but you need to be really mindful about all these niche and new platforms that are coming online, most of which emphasize video to be able to know how you're connecting with people in your own community.
Yeah, it's an incredible thing, and Mamdani he's just so charismatic. He feels very authentic. He feels like he's really, there for people, and I do believe that that is one of the things that lifted him up. Now, I'm also aware that he had a bunch of influencers, if you will, who got behind him, who pushed him forward. Do you have any suggestions or thoughts about those of us who are, say, local? Would there be influencers that we should go after, that kind of thing?
I always suggest to people really localize your race. If you're running for a town race, you really don't need some national influencer to
Mhm.
tweet about you or do a video. Those are the sorts of things, and I read about this in the book, that are often feel good, but not the best organizing, right? You might
Mhm.
feel like a rock star as a candidate that maybe you got some national figure to mention your name, but does that deliver votes for you locally? And often it doesn't. Of course, if you're running for a major federal office or a statewide office, then there could be some value there. But I think when people are running locally or for a region like a state legislative office, you really want to localize your race and make sure that you are talking to your voters locally. So if an influencer doesn't have a major following locally, I don't think it's that critical to focus on.
Right, right. Okay, well, that's a really good, piece of advice because I do think people think, oh my gosh, well, especially if I go out and I fundraise maybe in other states or other places, and maybe it's not necessarily a good thing. You really want to keep it local and focused on those that are going to be voting for you. Um, it's a very big sea change though, as we see what one used to hear, and when I ran, it was 80% of my budget went to mailing. And today, I love the way you're talking about two-thirds, it's voter contact, not necessarily mail. You're going to do 5 or 6 drops. And that digital was kind of a small, tiny little piece of it, and sort of an afterthought, if you will. So for you, you're saying anybody who wants to run, it's focus on a few platforms, things that maybe you do well, you feel good in. Is that right?
Yes, I think so. Focus on what the needs of your district are, because every district is different, right? If you have a district with a high senior population and maybe they're
Mhm.
behind gated communities, for example, and so it's going to be difficult to door knock there, you might want to amp up your mailing program more to reach them by mail. But if you're representing maybe a downtown district, a city district, well, then digital might be great to reach young people, young professionals. So every district is different, but as a rule of thumb, you'll see many do say at least two-thirds of your budget are going to voter contact. That is to ensure that your whole budget is not being spent giving it to a consultant, with all due respect to the consultants, to a headquarters, to a rent, to
Yeah.
technology. You want to be mindful. You've worked really hard to raise this money. And so you want to make sure that the money is being spent on what's going to make sure you win this race, which is really talking to voters.
Yeah, it's very, very important. Now, do you have some thoughts on what our candidates should be focused on coming up into the midterms? Do you have any ideas of areas to talk
Yeah,
about?
absolutely. I mean, I think affordability has been the issue. Parties
Mhm.
haven't always talked about it as much as I think voters wanted to hear about it. I think that has come more into focus since election year 2025, where Democrats really had a banner night, not only in Connecticut but across the country, talking about the rising cost of goods, the cost of living, affordability, and what can candidates do to address that. Now, what you might be able to do is different: local, state, federal. But if you're running for local or state office, there may be some policies, some efforts, some things that you can do to make things more affordable, make a community healthier, make your government more responsive, and generally to make life better. And so going into the midterm elections, which is 2026, they'll be here before we know it. It is all about
Mhm.
affordability, but trying to make life better for people. People, many are still living paycheck to paycheck. They're concerned about maybe the next disaster. They're seeing cruelty from their federal government. And so, what can we do to make sure that we truly represent people, and particularly at the local and state level, which I think are being expected to do even more these days, given so much of the cuts and the devastation at the federal level? How can local and state representatives represent them?
So, so important. Anybody tuning in right now, this is Trevor Crow. The show is Trevor and Friends, and I'm talking to Jimmy Tickey, who is, I believe, still vice chair of the Connecticut Democratic Party. Is that correct? And
Mhm.
he has written a terrific book on how to campaign, and it's really for everybody. This is not focused on just Democrats. Lisa Hammock, our executive producer, would like to ask you a question.
Yeah, hi Jimmy. As somebody who has also managed campaigns here in Connecticut, in our local area especially, I have a question about when we have a new candidate, someone who's never run for office before. I find that there's sort of a two sides to it. One is they bring a lot of fresh ideas because they don't really know what's involved in running. So they bring a lot of new ideas that they maybe want to approach things in a new way, and I appreciate the freshness of that. Although sometimes you have to find a way to point out that there are, as you said, there's a science to it. There are tried and true methods. There are best practices that have been proven to work. How do you find with a new candidate that balance between honoring their sort of fresh perspective and what they want to bring that's different, but making sure they understand those tried and true practices and best practices?
Right. Thank you, Lisa. No, that's a great question. And it is why I, after thought, decided to name the book The Art and Science of Running for Office. Because you're right. There are things you must do. There is a science. There is a regimentation to this. There's things you must do structurally. But there's an art to who you are as a candidate and what makes you you and how do you want to talk about yourself. And yes, there have been some exuberant first-time candidates who might have a fabulous fundraising idea, but you realize this will bankrupt the campaign and it really may not raise as much money as you might think. Or, you have some exuberant ideas. So I would say, let's start small. Let's start with introducing yourself to voters, showing them. Let's start with what we know works in a campaign. But you want the candidate to feel heard, and the candidate is the candidate. They are the ones putting themselves before voters. So I think they need to feel comfortable with how they are being presented to voters. It is their identity. It is their brand. So I think if they at least appreciate the way that they are being presented, then they should trust the campaign to pursue what works in a campaign. And if things are going well, then that might be an opportunity to maybe do things a little differently, to introduce a new program idea, to do something that maybe the town committee, which means the political party, hasn't done in the past. I think both at times in a campaign will be a little out of their comfort zone, and that is good. The candidate will be at first, and maybe the party that says, well, we've been doing things like this for 40 years. Well, if you've lost for 40 years, maybe we should think about doing things a little differently, but it has to be a blend, and I do talk about that in the book. It can't all be just what maybe the folks who have been there for a while want, and it can't always be out with the old, in with the new. You really need to blend the veteran campaigners with some fresh ideas, new ideas, see what works, and start small. And you'll be surprised, though. After a couple of weeks, couple of months, things might really start rocking and rolling in your campaign.
Great, thank you.
Really, really important. And I love that you've called it the art and science, like to Lisa's point, we really, and having been a first time candidate, you really are a deer in the headlights. You have no idea. You have this sort of, hey, my moral code is this, and this is why I want to run. But you absolutely have to rely on, the veterans and people who have this kind of information, and your book is a great way to download a lot of information. So anybody who's thinking about announcing their candidacy, I don't know, say in January, maybe should pick up your book. When will it be available?
So people can get it at organizingtowin.com. It is available for pre-order right now. So
Oh,
any book that is ordered right now at organizingtowin.com, I'll personally sign, and we will get it out to you in January. And then in January, it is with a Connecticut publisher, so it will be widely available in January, and it will be on Amazon as well.
great. Now, are you going to be doing a book tour for it?
I think I have to, right? I think we need to
Yes.
do a couple of events. So yes, I've been so focused on the typesetting for the book, which is basically how it looks, because I wanted to do a lot of graphics. I wanted it to be very visual. I think it's tricky to just explain how something works. I think visuals are important. So we do that with targeting and fundraising and how you would door knock and a lot of interesting concepts that we introduce. So there's a lot of graphics involved, which will be interactive infographics. And so once it comes out in January, yes, just starting to think about, we'll do some events in Connecticut. And I'd love to focus on local bookstores, our local independent bookstores that keep so many authors humming. I'm a first-time author, so I learned how to write a book much like I learned how to campaign, which was kind of just throwing myself at it.
You just jump in and go. Well, yeah, definitely come to Greenwich. A shout out to a couple. We have Diane's books here, and we have Athena book store in Old Greenwich. So come here. They would love to see you. So who should be reading this book other than people who are campaigning? Is there somebody else that should be reading about
I
this?
I think so many people. I think people that are maybe just curious about government, curious about politics. I've been running into people who say, I majored in political science in college and I never did anything with it. I'm so interested in your book. I watched the TV shows about politics and campaigning. I love politics. I think if someone just loves politics, I think they'll get a real kick out of this, understanding and appreciating the work that goes into running a race, a local or state race, particularly. I think for people that maybe have an interest in maybe running for office one day, this is definitely going to be helpful for them. It's the staffers, it's the volunteers, it's the activists, it's the protesters, it's people who work in the space, anyone that is in the political arena. I think we'll find that there is a story for them because I moved through not only the whole campaign, but the book actually ends with serving in office, your first 100 days, year-round organizing, so many tips for political parties and candidates to stay fresh, to stay involved, and keep in touch with people and stay in touch with their constituencies even after they're elected.
I love it. So a couple things, just having done a little studying on, again, Mom Donnie just blew me away on how he organized and got so many people involved. One of the things that he seemed to be doing was he would do like treasure hunts. He literally got people together and had them do different activities, whether it was a soccer game or, literally looking around for treasure in whatever area he was campaigning in. And he got young people out and off their screens and involved. And that created this, again, this sort of excitement and a general trend towards just like, let's all jump into this together. And this is such a hard thing to do as a today, as everybody's on their screens all the time and not even looking at each other, that he did something really special. I have just one more minute left. So first of all, Jimmy, thank you so much for coming on the show. And I have a lot to learn myself. And I don't know if I'm going to run again, but I definitely need to read your book. And anybody listening, this is Trevor Crow. The show is Trevor and Friends. It is brought to you by me today, trevorcrow.com. I'm a licensed marriage and family therapist. I specialize in couples therapy. And it's a tough time of year and everybody gets in lots of fights. So I'm here to help out. You can find me at trevorcrow.com. Jimmy Tickey, thank you very much. Very much. Good luck to you.
Thank you for having me.
Of course. All right, everybody, have a great day. Stay warm. It's cold out there.